These are the components of the function that we had seen now: function name, function call, function parameters, definition, local and global variables, and the return value. So, what is this function name? Now, what are the rules that govern the use of this function name? It must follow the same rules as we use for variables. So, for variables we know they can be a combination of letters or digits, but the first letter should be an alphabet. It can be in a lower or upper case, and after the first letter it can be letters or digits. Every function must end with a semicolon. That is, when you give the function declaration, it should end with a semicolon, like we see here in this example. Sum of int a comma int b followed by a semicolon. Sum is the name of the function. Int and a and b are the integer variables or arguments. They are of type integer. So, this is how a function name should be declared. Next, a function call. I had already mentioned what is a function call. It has to be done within the main function, and every time you call the function, the set of statements in that particular function will be executed. So, how does the compiler execute? It executes a function when a semicolon follows a function name. So, from this we indicate that every function call also is to be terminated by a semicolon. And what does it contain? How should a function call be formed? A function name should be there. It should be followed by a semicolon with the set of parameters. So, that is what indicates a function call. The example has been given here: calculate, int x and float y. So, calculate is the name of the function. It has two arguments, actual arguments. One is of type integer, another is of type float, and it is indicated by the semicolon that it is a function call. Next, you have the function parameters. This is nothing but the actual and formal parameters that we had seen. The rules that govern the use of this are: the variable names should be enclosed within parentheses. So, that is very important, and they must be separated by a comma. Like if you have a single variable, it is not a problem. Say you have two or more variables, whether of the same data type or different data type, you have to separately show it using a comma symbol separating the variables. And the types are, we have seen actual parameters. So, the variables that come in the function call are called the actual parameters. That is where they are terminated by a semicolon. The formal parameters are where the function is defined. So, here that function name followed by the set of parameters and all do not have the semicolon. Here only we actually define what the function is supposed to be doing. So, the parameters in the calling function are called actual parameters. The ones in the called function or function definition are called the formal parameters. Now, here comes the important part of the function definition. Now, what does this function definition mean? The set of statements that perform the specific task. So, what is a task performed by the function? And whenever the compiler encounters a function call, it searches the program for the function definition and execute the statements defined within it. So, as I told you, when there is a function call, the compiler needs to know that such a function exists in the program. So, that is the reason we declare a function beforehand. So, it searches the whole program where that particular function is defined. How it will search? Using the function name and the set of parameters. So, when it searches for the function and finds it, it jumps to it, executes a set of statements and returns the control to the main function. We will see about the local and global variables that we had seen in the function declaration. So, what is the meaning of the word local and global variable? We all know what is a variable. A variable is any name given to identify a certain value in C. So, this local variable is nothing but, from the name itself you can identify its scope is limited. It is local to a particular function. That means it is defined within the function for use inside that function only. C consists of many functions. A C program may have 2 or 3 functions in the program. So, if a variable is considered local, it is defined only in one function, it can be seen only by that function and it can be used only by that function. So, it is defined within the function body, accessible only to the container function, that is whichever function has defined it, only that can use this variable. Other functions cannot access, cannot see and cannot use these variables. So, they are local to that particular function where they are defined. So, that is the meaning of the word local variable. Global variables are defined outside the main function, that is even before the starting of the C program they are defined, say after the header files. We all know the header files come first, after that the main function starts. So, between the header files and the main function generally these global variables are declared. So, global in the sense they are accessible by all the functions in C, they are visible to all the functions and they can be used anywhere. So, multiple functions can use them. as they are defined outside the main function. So, this is the definition of local and global variables. Then you have this return value. So, we have return value is nothing but the value that is given by the return statement. This is actually the outcome of the function. Normally what we do is when we call a function, we expect that function to return the result as a value to the main function. But in certain cases we may print the result in the called function itself. So, that depends upon the user's choice. Normally when we return a value, it is expected to be the result of that function. Whatever computation that function has done, we expect it to send it back to the calling function. So, the result obtained after function execution is sent back to the function which called it. Normally we return only one value per function call, though in certain cases there are exceptions where we can return more than one value from a function. Exit from the called to the calling function is done by this statement. Like we have seen what is a function call. It normally occurs in the main statement or under the main function. So, you are calling a certain function and that function gets executed. How does the control get back to the calling function? So, there has to be some point at which the compiler understands that okay, now the function which is called is executed, now I have to get back to the executing program or to the controlled program. So, for that reason normally we have this return statement. If the return statement is missing in a certain function, then the compiler identifies from the closing brace that the function is terminated. Now, I should return control to the function which called this function. So, the return statement is a explicit indication to the compiler that the function block is complete, it is over. And normally when we have a return statement and we give a value, that value has to be collected by a variable in the calling function. For example, if you see here, a is equal to abc int k int l. So, abc is a function which is called, you are passing two actual parameters. The return statement, the return value that comes from that function is assigned to a. So, that is what we mean by the value has to be collected by a variable. So, the result of that function is assigned to the value a. So, this is the use of the return value in the C programming language.